All right, gang, we're going to see how the podcast goes this week with this setup and how much I hate holding my camera like this. Welcome to episode 3 of Brinly's Yapathon. This week's going to be a little bit different because I'm clearly not in my set. I have traveled home this week because my little brother is doing his first musical, and my grandma, it is her birthday. And we're actually going to be talking to her at the end with our first interview on the podcast. So, very much looking forward to that. Yeah, first interview guest and new set. I know we're only 3 weeks into this, but the show must go on despite being in like one of my childhood bedrooms. So, yeah, getting a little peek at like my life from when I was younger. It's filled with a lot of pink and like some baby stuff for my cousins. So actually this bed that I'm sitting on was the bed I would sleep in. I've always slept in at my grandmother's house. And when we were younger, because of like the big bed frame, we would call it the princess bed. And just what I named it as a kid. So to this day, this is still the princess bed. So if you're wondering where I get my mentality on life, it's probably something to do with this. Yep, so I'm back in Indiana, back in the Berg, which whenever I'm back here, it's always just such a strange experience, especially when I'm dealing with theater. Like, usually I don't have to directly interact with the theater scene when I'm back in Brownsburg, but of course I did this time because of my brother's musical, and we'll start off by saying Finnegan killed it. My little brother, absolute star in the making. He was he was in Newsies, and he played Wiesel, which is like the man who sells Newsies, the papers. And that boy had attitude. He was yelling at those kids. He was committed, okay? Full commitment in the body to the role, okay? He was not giving those kids a break. He was the sassiest. He was playing a 6-year-old. He was playing the sassiest 6-year-old man I'd ever seen. And what I was so impressed with is that even when he wasn't speaking, he was always acting. I truly was so proud of my brother. And I was really thinking about just how special it must be for these kids to be doing Newsies right now. So I also did my first musical in the auditorium that they were doing this musical in. So that was definitely a throwback for me too, to be seeing my youngest sibling doing a musical in the place where I did my first musical. Newsies is a much better musical than the one that I did. When I was in the 8th grade, they said, you know what these kids should do? Fiddler on the Roof. Were any of us Jewish? No. But they were like, yeah, Fiddler on the Roof. And then some of the kids got a little too into playing the Nazis, and then all of them were able to vote in the last election. So makes sense why we're here now. It brought back a lot of memories, and I was just thinking about how fantastic it must be for these kids to be doing Newsies in a time like this. When you're having young people get into the arts always challenge what you know about life and make you think about things further and make you think about, kids would not be thinking about general strikes if they weren't, forced to be learning a musical for 4 months. But some of these kids, it won't reach all of them, but some of these kids will really look at this material and they will see it in the world around them, and they'll start reflecting, and they'll start, putting pieces together because of this show. And like, community theater is so important because it does educate people and it makes them think about things they'd never have to think about before, especially young kids, but in like a very safe way. And that was the exact moment where my phone said, you will not be taking any more videos on your phone. So yeah, this setup was not thought out at all, and I knew I was going to wing it. So this is this week's podcast episode. Welcome to it. Anyways, as I was saying, just like children's theater and theater for young people is just such an important way to help educate people in a safe environment, especially when, and here's when Brinley's about to get passionate about something, especially when your educators are safe. I grew up, and a lot of you know me personally. If you don't know me personally, I grew up in a space where my educators were not safe people to be around. My high school theater teacher was an extraordinarily abusive woman who I hate in my soul, really, like I really do like really, really do like hate in my soul. Um, like I really am a person who, um, I don't forgive and I don't forget because I believe in accountability. And, my high school theater teacher taught me that. And yeah, to this day, like I hate this woman's guts. And, I know that she hates my guts too, because I was definitely the domino that she pushed, which led to her getting removed from her job position and has since been sent to the prairie, so to say, because of the domino that she pushed. That was Brinly Schreier. And yeah, so when you're being bullied as a small child, it teaches you quite a bit about life. And she, my big falling out with her made me somewhat of a, dare I say, celebrity in this town. Uh, which I don't think is narcissistic to say at all, because quite frankly, the amount of people who come up to me and play 20 questions with me, can be suffocating at times, but it's totally fine. I truly am happy to see people, but some people, do not come up to me in good faith. A lot of people come up to me and quite frankly are playing 20 questions to either try to feel better about themselves, try to justify something they did in the past, or directly play, flying monkey for the Wicked Witch of the West, my high school theater teacher. And for all you people, I'm sure none of them are tuning in, but know that I know that you're doing that, okay? So, which is why I gave you the world's most pretentious response when you asked me how I was doing. I'm doing fantastic. I'm so good. But they're too old to know podcasts probably exist. So, probably fine. Um, but all of that definitely gives me perspective on life in the sense of going back to my brother's musical, just like seeing how much like fun these kids were having on stage and thinking about the lessons that they were learning while being in the show. Like Newsies, if you don't know, the show is about these kids from the 1930s who handed out papers in New York. So of course, the day I land in my small town of Brownsburg, Indiana, and I'm ready to take a break from the city, I walk into my middle school and the entire place is decked out in New York gear everywhere. Like they have up like big images, big like free online images of different streets in New York up. All streets that I've been on, because they're all like very iconic streets. Like one of the streets is a photo like taken right below the Manhattan Bridge, which is where me and my boyfriend Reese, the first time we ever hung out outside of the dorm, we hung out on that street. And it wasn't like a date, but it was sort of a date. And so like the first meal I ever ate with like my future husband was like on that street. And so so then it's funny too, because then when the ops come up to me and they're like, how are you doing? I'm like, me, I'm great. You see that picture there? That's where I fell in love. So, they kind of were walking themselves into it because they want me to be doing poorly. And in reality, I'm not doing poorly. I'm actually doing very, very well. But, I'm a dramatic bitch and I will complain, but I really am doing well. But so yeah, they walked themselves in that trap. But so yeah, it's like I get to Brownsburg and immediately they're like, do you want to go to New York? And I'm like, it's just funny how you attach like New York or LA to anything and it's so glamorized and then you live there and then you're like, it smells like piss. But whatever. But again, so the show is about these kids from the 30s and they're handing out newspapers and they raise the prices on the newspapers and try to force the kids to sell the papers and make less money for doing the same work. And so the kids go on strike. And I just think it's so important for young people, especially when you're acting, like they're putting those, they're like, they're putting these ideas of like a strike into action, even if they're not like actually doing a strike. They're still like in their body pretending to like be angry and riled up and going on strike and going, it's not okay when the big guy kicks down the little guy. And like they're embodying that. And these kids were so precious. They all did an absolutely fantastic job. Like they were so committed and you could just tell like these kids were enjoying every single minute of the production that they were in, and it was so precious. But it's just also just wonderful to see kids, you know, be learning these lessons in such a safe way and learn that like, and then, you know, then the show, of course, the kids win and learning that like, if kids back then in the 1930s, when they didn't have technology and you know, a lot of the kids in the show were supposed to be orphans. It's like these kids didn't even have parents and they still could stand up for what they believe in. I just thought it was so empowering to see young kids be learning those things through the arts. And it makes me happy that at least the arts in my hometown are a lot safer than they used to be, which, you know, is something I'll probably talk about endlessly throughout my entire career, just like about protecting the arts. And that's one of the most important things I will ever do in my career is spread advocacy for there needs to be protection within the arts, because even the actual Broadway community, I mean, there's so much corruption in it and there's so much exploitation that happens. And because it is done on such a professional scale, it really does leak down to our, you know, small little suburban towns. And then that abuse, well, it's not the exact same abuse that's happening. I mean, in some places, I'm sure it is, but the, you know, the abuse is normalized. And that's something as I get older and my career grows, I will always, always advocate for. I'm very passionate about believing there needs to be safety nets for children, and children must be listened to and taken more seriously and know that if there's ever an adult who's being out of line, that they will never be in trouble for speaking out for what happened to them, or that they will be believed, because I was not believed when I was younger. So it's something I will continue making statements about, and I will probably bring up at every single occasion for the rest of my life. And I explore elaborately, and, you know, probably I will explore this theme in about 500,000 words in my book series, Andromeda. So, I mean, yeah, there's a reason my book series is written this way it's written, and it's all tied into that. So it was so touching for me to see just these kids go out there and have a great time and being educated in a safe space. Um, it's good to see them doing an appropriate show. Like the past couple of years before that, like sometimes your white suburban town from home acts like your white suburban town from home. Because the past few years before this, I don't know if they had like an administration change or what, but they had been doing shows that were completely not appropriate, like pretty much entirely white cast, because it is Indiana. In the past couple of years, like right when I was in middle school, they did Fiddler on the Roof. And then years before that, they did Lion King. And then after that, they did Mulan. And what was the other one that was insane? Aladdin. Okay. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, but like the year before this, they did like Shrek. So nature's healing is all to say in conclusion to all of those segments. Nature is healing, and thank God for that. That was wonderful to see. And again, biggest thing, shout out to my little brother. He's a star in the making. So everyone keep your eye out for Finnegan, because that kid killed it. And they're doing Newsies again next year at the high school. So he's locking in for that. We're gonna lock in together. And I can't wait to see Newsies again next year. So you'll hear my Newsies review part 2, this time next year for the high school production of Newsies. Moving on, completely pivoting. You know we gotta talk about the hot topics this week, and you know we gotta talk about our boy Donnie. Oh, Donnie. Oh, Donnie. Who knew that Donnie and Bill were toxic yaoi, toxic doomed yaoi this whole time? Oh my gosh. That's like the best thing ever. I mean, when I heard the news, the first thought I had was Christmas came early this year. Christmas came early this year, because there's no way. And I will not be home for my family's Thanksgiving, but I cannot wait to hear all the stories of people who are home for Thanksgiving and just how that's going to go for them this year. I mean, like, it's a Christmas miracle. What a beautiful, beautiful gift to give to people with blue hair and pronouns. Like, the fact that they get to go home for Thanksgiving this year and be like, your Lord and Savior Donald J. Trump was given, you know, the Iron Dome to Bill Clinton. Like, oh my gosh! There's no way the libtards got that lucky this year. after Zeron won too, like, oh my gosh, being home right now in a Republican state, seeing like Republican people I went to high school with after I've moved to New York and Zeron just won, and then Donald J. Trump is gay, that is, oh, oh, it is so good. It's so good. And I mean, like, of course, it's like insane that like none of these Republicans cared that he was, a child predator. They were like, that's forgivable. But gay for Bill Clinton is where they draw the line. That is the craziest thing ever. And it was not on my bingo board. It was not on, I mean, it's just like nothing in my wildest dreams could I have anticipated or predicted this to happen. But it's really crazy that that somehow is the straw that's breaking the camel's back for all of them. Like, child predator, we're okay with that. But gay for Bill Clinton, not okay. But actually the funny thing is, right, because in the emails, I'm sure everyone's aware of, like, I don't have to explain the situation. But in the emails, right, it just said Bubba, which is what they, I guess, called Bill Clinton. And I'm too young to have known that firsthand, but that's what the streets are saying. But what people are also saying is, the other thing, if it's not Bill Clinton, Ghislaine Maxwell had a horse named Bubba. So, either he, had sexual relationships with that president, or he had sexual relationships with that horse. Which is just another insane turn of events. Either one is insane, and either way, Putin has a video of it, which is actually mind-bogglingly, makes sense. That part does make sense. I'd been saying for a while that I mean, like, who didn't think he was a Russian asset? I mean, cause obviously. But, so yeah, the fact that, like, again, what they're getting upset over the gay thing and not the whole treason thing, which is pretty mind-boggling to me. That, again, this is what they're hyperfixating on. But, we can, it's insane. It's just so crazy. And whatever turn of events happen next, it's like being locked into the worst soap opera of our lives. And what's crazy too is, like, I remember, like, when I was at my brother's show, I was thinking about what was happening during when I was in middle school, and it was like Trump had just started running for president. And I remember all of us thinking, like, there's no way he'll become president. It was like a joke back then. They were like, oh yeah, Trump versus Hillary. And we were all like, Hillary's gonna win. She's gonna be our first female president and stuff like that. I remember my friends and I talking about that in theater when I was in middle school. And we were at the time, just completely naive. And we're like, Hillary's gonna be the first female president. We did not think Trump was gonna win at all. And of course now we're here. But it's just interesting to think about, like, the different political events. And, like, just like literally 10 years later, we are still dealing with this. Like, that is nauseating, the fact that we're still dealing with this. But also, even talking about Hillary, like, bringing her into this, I want to rewatch the 2016 presidential debates because, oh my goodness, just like, oh my gosh, the folklore love triangle. What? Oh my gosh. Donald Trump is August. And Hillary Clinton is Betty, but Hillary Clinton looks like Sabrina Carpenter. And Bill Clinton is James. This is crazy. The folklore love triangle between Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and Hillary Clinton was not what I was expecting this year. And I gotta go back and I gotta rewatch the debates because those little comments, they're so much more personal than we ever knew. And that tweet that resurfaced of Donnie being like, like, Hillary Clinton can't fully satisfy her husband. Oh my gosh. But you in the bathroom said you were glitter. Like, oh, but Hillary Clinton's at dinner. Like, something like that. Like, that's more so what I'm thinking right now. Like, that is, like, oh my gosh. It's, Christmas really came early. And while the world's going to shit, and, it is important to note that, like, we can have our fun and joke about this and celebrate because we need the release of energy. Like, we need to, like, feel like some sort of win. We need that desperately, and it's important to feel that. But it's also important to hold space and remember that, like, there are real victims here and they need to be the priority, and uplifting their voices and their stories and giving them the space to express what they need to express and for them to teach us things. Like, we all need to be learning from them right now because they have a horrific, unique perspective on life, that is going to help women everywhere understand their empowerment. Like, the fact that these women are standing up and truly risking their lives to speak out against what happened to them. Like, they are the priority, and they're such a huge voice in feminism, and their bravery like cannot be unrecognized. And I think after the hype of, and the ridiculousness of this, when we become like numb to the fact that this happened, then this just becomes another thing that happened. We need to go back to focusing on these women and their stories. Because really what they're doing is absolutely astonishingly brave, and that's really got to be the focus. So I guess this is probably a good time to move into the motivation of the week, which we're going to do now. And we're going to finish off the podcast with me interviewing my grandmother. So we'll do the motivation of the week now, and then we'll move into our interview segment here shortly. So motivation of the week. This comes from me sitting in my middle school, waiting for the show to begin and thinking about where I was in life when I was in middle school. So like when I was in middle school, this is kind of like the 2013 to 2015 era. Of course, musical theater, like Hamilton dropped when I was in the 8th grade, and Dear Evan Hansen was a new thing. And, we're kind of thinking about that time period of like mental health culture online, and mental health just started being taken seriously, just not enough for anyone to get actual treatment. But when I was in middle school, like I was not popular in middle school. I loved Undertale. I would go to Comic-Con as Undertale characters. I had a cross eye. Of course, I got the tism, so I was super popular. Everyone really liked me and thought I was super cool in middle school. I wasn't horrifically bullied at all. So my mental health was, pretty horrible. I mean, I was a middle schooler who dealt with, and I think this was a big thing with internet culture because it was being talked about so much. And I do think it put ideas in people's heads. And I won't say that's the full reason that I was experiencing this, but it definitely, allowed me to explore it, especially like 13 Reasons Why had just come out. But so I guess trigger warning, but like when I was in middle school, I was very much having deep thoughts about not existing anymore. And that was something I was really exploring back then. And it was, I think because of the internet, it was like a fantasy, I think, of like escapism for a lot of us. And I definitely was also, leaning into that escapism at the time. And I just remember being that age and thinking like, I'm just never gonna, graduate high school, and I'm never gonna go to college, and I'm never gonna do this, and that. So now sitting here like a decade later and still being here, it just really makes you go like, wow, you can, like, things do get better. And if you would have told me that when, especially when you're that young and you're going through like puberty, it's horrible. If someone would have told me that, like, I would have been like, yeah, sure. But it's really interesting how like after I left middle school and I got into high school, I very much dedicated myself to trying to better myself because I understood better my mental health. Because I understood that if I ever wanted to be happy, like I was so miserable that I was like, if I ever want to be happy someday, like I have to put in the work now, or it's never gonna happen for me. And I started going to therapy like twice a week and everything like that. And even then, like I couldn't see how I'd ever be happy someday. But it's nice because when I'm back in a space like that, my old middle school, like I really was able to sit with myself and think about how I used to be and what I used to think and believe. And thinking about what that version of myself used to think and believe, it almost feels like I get to sit with her and say, hey, like, look at everything I have now. And it's really interesting because like naturally the way life played out, and because I've always worked on bettering myself and, always fighting for what I want in life and advocating for myself, because I have dedicated myself to trying to build the life that I want and not giving in to all the doom and gloom the intense doom and gloom that I had experienced. And when I was going through my very young, volatile childhood and high school upbringing, because despite how dark it got, like, because I never gave into that, I have so many of the things that, like, I dreamed about when I was younger. Like, I was joking earlier that, like, well, number one, I have the world's best boyfriend ever. Like, he's incredible. And I mean, there's no words within existence to capture how much I love that man. And I, I just remember when I was younger, like, I always had crush on, like, anime boys in middle school. And I mean, my boyfriend looks like every anime boy I'd ever had a crush on ever. So it's like, I get to sit with my middle school self and be like, hey, you have your dream anime boyfriend, and you live in New York, and you're still into sci-fi, and you're a writer now, and you're still doing theater, just not in the ways that you thought you would be. And even now when you have bad days, like, what I have learned, I guess the motivation, the full takeaway is that things do get better under the condition of, like, you have to put the effort in to make things get better. I think a lot of the time we hear, like, oh, things get better. And people, when they hear that, they don't believe it because it feels passive. It's just like they say it as if, like, well, things will magically get better. But it's like, things get better if you dedicate yourself to protecting your boundaries and advocating for what you want and always fighting for yourself. And if you fight for yourself, you will teach other people to fight for themselves. People think it's selfish to prioritize self, but I think prioritizing self is, like, the most important thing anyone can do. You should always prioritize your dreams and your ambitions and your happiness, because we all can only unlock happiness within ourselves. No one can ever give you happiness. So if you can be an example and teach people how to live in a fulfilled, happy way, that is, like, the best thing you can do for other people. And some people will ignore that message and they won't get it, but that isn't up to you, because at the end of the day, like I said, happiness is completely dependent on whether or not you're willing to accept that someday you could be happy. So if you're at a really dark place now, I would say now's a great time to start accepting that, hey, someday I could be happy with a lot of work, but knowing that the work is fully worth it. Like, I look back and I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't give up. So, like, I guess the motivation for the week is never give up. And it sounds so corny and cheesy, but it's so true. It's just like, you can't ever give up, because, like, me 10 years ago in that middle school could have never imagined that I had the incredible life that I had now, but it is because I've dedicated every single day of my life to bettering it and furthering it to reach my dreams and goals. And I'm going to keep doing that. And I can't wait to look at this podcast 10 years later and go, wow, like, I've come so far from even that moment. So, and everyone can do that. Everyone can do that. And everyone's dreams are different. And everyone, I truly believe, has the ability to become the person they want to be, but you have to be willing to put in the work. But as long as you put in the work, like, it's yours. So that's my motivation for the week. Thank you so much for listening to that little yap, and we're about to transfer into the interview portion of the podcast, so let's head over there now.